On the first day of their trek, four friends, Greg, Paul, Fiona, and Ruthie, embarked on a journey into the mountains, motivated by curiosity and the thrill of adventure. They were in search of an unexplored and mysterious destination, eager to uncover what lay hidden in the remote wilderness. As they reach the summit, Paul suddenly hears a strange sound calling to him. Drawn to it, he walks forward without paying attention and falls into a hidden crevice. Greg, worried for his friend, quickly climbs down to help and finds himself in a large cave. There he sees Paul sitting on the ground, muttering quietly to himself. In front of them is a huge, strange-looking skeleton. Greg can't tell if it's real, but, feeling uneasy, he focuses on checking on Paul. Paul whispers weakly, warning Greg not to touch him or he will die. Confused and unsure of what's happening to his friend, Greg carefully carries him out of the crevice. As they continue their trek, the group stumbles upon an abandoned house nearby. With no other shelter in sight, they decide to stay there for the night. While checking on Paul, they notice him clutching a strange, bone-like flute in his hands. On the second day, the weather worsens and Paul's condition deteriorates. He remains silent and motionless. Meanwhile, as Ruthie looks outside, she notices a shadowy figure in the raging snowstorm. As she moves closer, the figure mimics her movements before suddenly charging toward her. Terrified, she rushes inside and slams the door shut. Moments later, Ruthie hears loud pounding from outside. To her shock, it's Greg and Fiona knocking at the door. Shaken, she asks if they saw or heard anything, but they insist they didn't. Later that night, while Ruthie sleeps, Paul leans in and whispers something into her ear. On day 3, they realize that Paul has wandered off. Searching for him, they find him sitting on a bridge, seemingly in a trance, blowing into the eerie flute. As they try to persuade him to return, Ruthie suddenly starts acting strangely. In a shocking turn of events, she stabs Greg and Fiona and then pushes their lifeless bodies over the cliff. Without hesitation, she turns and plunges into the abyss herself. Now left completely alone, Paul continues to play the flute. In Missouri in 2018, former Detective James Lasombra works at a security store. Ever since losing his wife, Allison, and their son, Henry, in a car accident a year earlier, he has been tormented by a mysterious voice whispering the same haunting question.
Where were you?
James has taken a protective interest in Amanda Quayle, a troubled teenager. As a close friend of her mother, Nora, he often looks out for Amanda, especially since her relationship with Nora has been strained ever since her father passed away. To Amanda, James has become something of a surrogate parental figure. One day Amanda goes missing, and her panicked mother, Nora, calls James for help. Together they discover a chilling message written in blood on Amanda's mirror. "The empty man made me do it." As the police take over the investigation, James begins his own inquiry. At Amanda's high school, James speaks with her friend, Devera Walsh. Sitting in his car, she recounts an incident from a few nights earlier, when she, Amanda, and their friends, Brandon, Julianne, Meyer, Lisa, and Duncan, went to a bridge to summon the empty man, an urban legend said to manifest over 3 days. Day 1, those who summon him will hear his voice. Day 2, he will reveal his presence. Day 3, he comes for them. As part of the ritual, the group blew into an empty bottle. Amanda then sat down and whispered "the empty man" as if chanting. Moments later, they heard someone, or something, blowing back from the other end of the bridge. Terrified, they ran off. Devara also recalls seeing Amanda at the mall. She remembers Amanda whispering into Brandon's ear in an eerily similar way to how Paul whispered to Ruthie years ago. While continuing his investigation, James visits the bridge in search for Amanda. He finds the same bottle the teens used and blows into it. He then follows a ladder down beneath the bridge, where he makes a horrifying discovery. The hanged corpses of Brandon, Julianne, Meyer, Lisa, and Duncan. The same ominous message from Amanda's mirror is written nearby. Later that day, Devara enters a spa. As steam fills the room, the empty man appears and attacks her, forcing her to stab herself repeatedly with scissors, making it look like a suicide. The authorities rule it as such, but James finds the circumstances too disturbing to be mere coincidence. Determined to uncover the truth, James digs deeper into the origins of the empty man. His investigation leads him to a mysterious cult known as the Pontifex Institute. Their beliefs trace back to Bhutan, linking them to the events that took place in the Ura Valley years ago. The next day, James arrived at the Pontifex Institute's headquarters. Inside, a large crowd gathered as Arthur Parsons, the Institute's enigmatic leader, delivered a speech. His words held an eerie conviction, his followers hanging on to every syllable. Outside, James meets Garrett, who warns him that Amanda has been moved to another location. The Institute has big plans for her and has taken her to a Pontifex camp out of state. Before leaving, Garrett reminds James that these people are dangerous. James drives to the location Garrett described, a secluded and desolate area concealing a camp known as Elsewhere. Upon arrival, he notices the eerie glow of a massive bonfire surrounded by a crowd chanting in unison. Suddenly, the fire flickers and dies out, plunging the camp into darkness. Then, as if drawn by an unseen force, every head turns toward James. Their eyes lock onto him, and they begin to move, first walking, then running toward him with terrifying speed. Panicked, James scrambles back to his car and speeds away, leaving the ominous crowd behind in the darkness. While waiting outside the Pontifex Institute, he sees Garrett with the others and starts following them. This leads him to a hospital, where he finds an older Paul in a vegetative state. Cult members enter the room, bowing as if worshipping him. Later that night, James decides to return to the hospital and unexpectedly finds Amanda in Paul's room taking care of him. However, she is completely under the influence of the cult and the empty man. She then reveals the horrifying truth. The cult needed a new vessel since Paul's body could no longer sustain the entity. They experimented and decided to create one. Suddenly, James felt dizzy. While listening to Amanda, his memory blurred, and he could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was fabricated. Amanda reveals to James that the cult had written the script for his very existence. He is forced to confront the trauma he had long avoided. On the night his wife and son died in a car accident, James had been with Nora, having an affair. Since then, he has carried deep guilt, believing he could have prevented the tragedy if he had been there. In reality, the cult had fabricated his memories, constructing a false life to make him the perfect vessel. He was their tulpa, their empty man. Completely drained of his will and identity, James found himself back in the hospital. In Paul's room, now fully possessed by the entity, he raised his gun and fired multiple shots into Paul's head. Paul's body was no longer needed. After killing the old vessel, James fully accepts the empty man into himself. Outside the room, the doctors and nurses, now revealed as cult members, slowly turn toward him and bow. He is their new empty man.
If you loved this recap, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss out on more free movie recaps. Got a movie in mind that you want us to break down? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.